Welcome. It's Friday, April the 3rd, and for the time, really cares what time it is. Where do you got to be anyway? So what I wanted to do today was actually go through the oxygen administration by non-rebreather mask, show you and review some of the things about pin indexing systems and how much oxygen we need to actually run and our flow rate, what that's going to be on the mask. So I will put the actual skill sheet up after we look at the equipment, and we can just kind of run through some of these things, make sure you have those in specific order. And although you may not have oxygen tanks and non-rebreathers, just memorizing the sheets at this point is going to be important, right? That rote memorization of just writing these things down time after time after time until it starts to stick with you. So without further ado, I'm going to start oxygen administration by non-rebreather mask with taking BSI and PPE, right? It's always the first step that you have on your skill sheets. So PPE in oxygen administration at this point, I don't have the goggles, I don't have the gloves on. So again, keep in mind for testing, we can verbalize that. But when you are getting close to someone's airway and the droplets and the potential how far that can actually go, obviously you're going to want to protect yourself. So again, it's fine to verbalize this as you simply practice, or we do this in actual testing, but you know you got to wear that stuff. I've even taken that a step further. Yes, I'm wearing a lovely safety vest, but I do happen to be in my garage at this point, and if someone does come crashing in, I want to make sure they can see me. So always consider scene safety. Now, the second step on your list for the skill sheet is to assemble equipment. And I think the easiest way to do this is just to let you know, actually working with all of the equipment, and that special thanks go out actually Desert Fire CPR, who a lot of this equipment is from, in addition to Aztec EMS. So thank you guys for the equipment. As I move through the sheet, crack the valve. And if you remember, why are we actually cracking the valve? It's to clear any potential dust or particles that could actually be in there. That's that lovely noise you hear in class. I always know if I'm in my office, hey, they must be doing oxygen, because every couple of minutes you hear that same sound. But when we connect, what's this called? Yes, the regulator. The regulator utilizes what's known as the pin indexing system. That's my little setup down here. And when you're using an oxygen regulator, the only type of gas that this will actually connect to is going to be oxygen. Acetylene, nitrogen, those are going to have different setups, so you can't inadvertently connect one of those to an oxygen regulator. So as I connect this, remember these are only hand tightened. And as I do that, I'm now going to crack the valve, because this is the point where we want you to verbalize how much oxygen is in your tank. Good review for a test question. So when your tank falls below this amount, that's when you want to think about replacing it. If you can see, my oxygen is just slightly under full, which I believe on this would be 2216. So we're right at 1700 on this. So we've connected the valve. We've made sure we have no leaks on. I'm going to actually place this in the case, because if you remember, this was probably in one of your first weeks of class. We don't leave these things unattended. I don't want to just set this up on my table. This is not something that I would like to go jetting through into the living room. So I will actually be using this secure area for that. As we set that up, non-rebreather. And for a non-rebreather, it's funny, I was looking at some of the different resources for this. And when you look at the oxygen amount, right, concentration of oxygen in the air, 21%. Great. If I start utilizing a nasal cannula, that may go from 24 to 44%. There's CPR masks or face shields that are going to deliver about 55% oxygen. But the benefit of this, obviously, is we want your patient that's breathing. Because when they're breathing, now they have that potential to suck in up to that 90% oxygen range. So you'll see any different numbers. You can see from 60% to 90%, but a lot of that's going to depend on your flow rate. And flow rate, based on your sheet, when you look at the critical criteria, it's the second to the last one, is it wants to run that at least 10 liters a minute. 10 liters a minute may be okay if someone has a decreased tidal volume and they're not moving a lot of air, but I've always been fond of keeping this at 15 liters per minute, just in case they are taking those deep or potentially really big breaths, so they don't end up sucking the bag dry. I'll probably set this up at a smaller rate initially, just so you can see what I mean by actually sucking the bag dry. So simply connecting to your little Christmas tree or your port as you have that, and then adjusting. I think you can see the flow rate is at 0, but I'm going to run this. And keep in mind, it's always with a gloved hand. Because if I do want that bag to inflate, how am I going to make the bag inflate? I'm going to take my gloved finger, put this on there, and you'll see it actually starts to inflate. This is not set up at 15 liters per minute right now. I'm doing this a little slower so I can give you that example of sucking your bag dry. But now, all right, we take this, adjust it. Mouth and nose. Watch. Nothing like a little extra carbon dioxide in your system. So now, when I flow this to the actual 15, and again, gloved hand would go on your bag, but we should have a much easier time of keeping that bag inflated. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the skill. Now, when I go here, we can actually pull up the oxygen administration screen. You can see this one's only 11 points, but no, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, send it in the comments or call me. Every station that there is with National Registry is going to start with this. And there's usually that combination of PPE and scene safety, right? You guys have been, and I don't want to put this in a negative light and say programmed, so I'll say educated to know you don't enter that scene if it's not safe, and if we don't have the appropriate gear, then obviously I don't want to make contact with that patient. A little more challenging times that you're dealing with now, but that still needs to be our number one goal, right? I know we've all reviewed chapter 2 this week and looked at all that PPE and talked about it, and now people are unfortunately being asked to do things that you would never normally do. Don't reuse your N95, right? There should be new ones, but in the times that you're dealing with, we all just try and make the best for that. So look over here, takes a verbalized PPE. And again, if you don't have these skill sheets, they are available on nremt.org. It's just under the practical skills, and you can actually print these out. I would recommend you take all of them, keep them in a little folder, because at some point in time, we will be jumping back to these. So we can make sure you're comfortable, confident, and more importantly, proficient practitioners that are ready to get out there and save some lives. So I would ask if you had any steps on here that didn't seem to make sense, but crack the valve. Great, we cracked the valve. Why do we crack the valve? To make sure there's no dust, debris, or anything else that's stuck in there. When you look at the assemble, the regulator to the oxygen tank, how is that done? It's through the pin indexing system. That's an important takeaway from that. The checking the tank pressure, right? Remember, you want a minimum of that 500. If your standards have changed, and this is for a different agency, maybe they want you to place it this or that, depending on your transport time, that's when that becomes appropriate. Right now, we'll say at least 500 should be in your tank before you change it out. The checking for leaks, Again, you don't have to spray soapy water around the edges of that to see if it's actually bubbling up. You will hear it. It's pretty easy to recognize that you've got a leak coming from your tank, but you haven't put the non-rebreather on yet. So remember, it's only a hand tighten. Don't use a wrench. You're just going to wear out those valves on the inside, and it's going to be worthless. So we check for leaks, attach the non-rebreather mask to the correct port of the regulator. Well, and I haven't seen it before, but there are some with dual ports that come out of that. But where else would you attach this if there's only one place oxygen's coming out, right? I guess it would be a critical criteria or a failure if you tried to connect oxygen to the hand tightening valve. That's the only thing I can interpret from that someone may do. But if you do this, well, let's just say there's always work at the post office. So, and I'll let the post office, but just know that's probably a better place to work if you're trying to plug this in the wrong port. So look down, turn on the oxygen flow to pre-fill the reservoir bag. Yes, it's going to tell you at least 10. Again, think about patients, the volume of air, how deeply they're actually breathing, because we don't want them to, what's the term? Suck the bag dry. The last part, attach mask to the patient's face. And kind of you may have seen how I was just adjusting this to fit onto the face. Great, but that's that little bar that can help melt around the nose, and it just makes it fit. These are fairly comfortable, but if someone is claustrophobic, does that become an issue? Remember, we can fall back to the nasal cannula and get you up to 44% if you're running that at 6 liters a minute. But that sounds like a story for another day. So hopefully you found this informative, and hopefully as well, we will get you in practicing this stuff as soon as we can. But for now, please just keep memorizing those sheets, write them down as much as you know prior to us actually coming back or wherever this moves forward. That's only going to make it for an easier time. So thanks.